You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. You're in for a treat today. You're in for a woman who has lived a remarkable life. She's been impacting lives for many decades. She's got an incredible story, an incredible heart, an incredible cadence. You're going to feel like you're sitting next to your wise, beautiful, selfless, faithful grandmother as we go through this story. And yet, as you go deeper into the story, you're going to feel like you're sitting next to Wonder Woman, because this woman wears a cape. Okay, here it is. Karen Olson is the founder and the CEO emeritus of Family Promise. Maybe an organization you know about because it's a national not-for-profit that has helped more than, her organization, 1 million people experiencing homelessness through the support of volunteers around the country. While working as a successful marketer executive in New York City, Karen's life took an unexpected turn when she stopped to share a sandwich with a woman named Millie. That simple act of kindness, one sandwich with one woman in one city, inspired Family Promise, and that movement has impacted millions of lives around the world. What a crazy, beautiful, humble beginning. Today in our conversation, Karen joins us to share the childhood loss that shaped her heart for people who are hurting. It's painful to hear her tell this story, but it's important we hear the birthplace of her compassionate heart. She'll talk about the encounter with Millie. Remember that sandwich that inspired Family Promise? And she'll talk about what she's learned during decades of serving families experiencing homelessness. We talk about why real change always starts with seeing the person in front of you, how small acts of compassion can create a ripple effect outward, and how purpose oftentimes finds us when we least expect it to. But we've got to have our eyes open for it and our heart trained to respond, yes. Karen ends the conversation today reflected on an accident that left her in a wheelchair, and yet also the hopeful, beautiful spirit and perspective she's gained through that accident. It's an incredible story too. My friends, if you're wondering how to make a difference in a world that oftentimes feels overwhelming, this conversation with Karen is for you. Her story is beautiful, and it's a reminder that changing someone's life does not always begin with a grand plan. Sometimes it starts with simply crossing the street, seeing the person in front of you, and loving the one right there. Sometimes it starts with a sandwich. So buckle up, get ready for a ride as I bring on my friend, now yours. You're going to love her. Her name is Karen Olson. Karen, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you, John. Delighted to be here.
Well, I was telling you before we hit record officially that on this podcast, I bring on individuals who have overcome mighty things. I bring on individuals who have not only endured struggle, but gone on to do incredible things in their life. And then I said to you, and Karen, I can't think of anyone who's done more of both of those things than you. So you have an incredible life story and an incredible ripple effect. So thank you for your yes on our podcast today.
Well, again, I'm delighted to be here and to share my story with the hope it will help others.
So why don't we begin sort of at the beginning? Tell our community what Family Promise does. Like, what is Family Promise all about?
Family Promise provides shelter, meals for homeless families, and it helps to prevent homelessness through its homelessness prevention program.
And it's impacted more than just one or two or 10 lives. About how many individuals around the world have now been impacted through this mission?
More than 1 million homeless family members have been helped.
So I want you all
Men,
to
women, and children.
hang on to that for a moment. More than 1 million men and women, families, kids have been infected through this mission work. And when you hear the origin story, you're going to recognize again the power of one. It was not a beginning of a million movement toward 1 million. It instead began with this humble service of one. And so, Karen, I'm going to back up a little bit. I grew up in a very safe, structured, consistent family. And I understand that you also had that for
Did.
about 12 years. And then your life began
Yes,
to change pretty fundamentally.
yes.
Tell me about that.
I had what you would call an idyllic childhood. I grew up in Darien, Connecticut, and summers were spent swimming in Long Island Sound or in a pool at a country club. I was just a happy kid. I'd play outside until dark, and everybody loved being around my house because they loved my mother, who was very loving to everyone, but lots of fun. And so I knew nothing else but a happy childhood. My grandmother would come on weekends from New York City, and we'd go out on our boat, and I'd aquaplane behind the boat, would bring my friends. Just everything was happy. And then out of the blue, well, it wasn't exactly out of the blue because I knew my mom was unhappy. My dad was having an affair. And one day she stood at the door and kissed me goodbye, which was normal, and handed me my lunch and my books. But when I turned around, she would usually be gone. But this time she stayed there. And I took a few more steps across the street, and I turned around and she was still there waving. So I waved. And then over the stone wall in the next street, which I would climb over, and I waved, and she was still there. And so this was unusual, but I didn't think anything of it. I got on the bus and I got to school. There was a homeroom period where we would have our lunch. And I had my lunch and I saw a woman from the principal's office come in and whispered something in Mr. Luce's ear, who was the man in charge of the lunch period. He was a Latin teacher. And he nodded, looked at me. And then he said to me after the woman left, he said, Karen, when you finish your lunch, go to the principal's office. They want you. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, I hadn't done anything wrong. I don't know what that was about. So I jumped up right away. And he said, no, finish your ice cream sandwich. So I bolted down the ice cream sandwich and I went to the office. The women there were fairly flustered, but they said to me, you're wanted at home and we'll drive you there. I said, okay, thank you. And so I got in her car and she was clearly nervous. She was making chit chat with me about my sister and confusion of our names, Karen and Carol. She was just trying to fill a void. And then when I got there, my grandmother from New York, Gaga, I called her, she was standing at the end of the walkway. And I didn't expect to see her there. And she greeted me and said, Karen, Mom has had a nervous breakdown. So I thought, oh, okay, that probably isn't too bad because I'd heard that term before. And she had said she's going to be okay, but she had this nervous breakdown. And that really concerned me, to say the least.
So you're 12 years old, you're up at school, essentially sent to the principal's office. They tell you without telling you anything, you're wanted at home. Some lady picks you up, you go on home, and that's when your grandmother, who's not there during the week, is there and says your mother's had a nervous breakdown. And our younger listeners don't even know what that is.
No,
When we were growing up, it's something we heard about a lot. People would have nervous
yeah,
breakdowns.
nervous
They
breakdowns.
go away
Yeah,
for a little while and then they come back and everything was
yeah,
fine. So you're
exactly.
assuming your mother had this thing and she'll be coming home shortly.
That's what I thought, but it's not how it lived out. She actually committed suicide or tried to commit suicide,
Yes.
and she jumped out of or dove out of. My mother was a very good diver and won medals for her diving and swimming. She dove out of the second floor roof onto her head and broke her neck. The rescue squad came and got her and brought her to the hospital. And at that point, I knew nothing, just my father and my grandmother said, "Your mom is going to be okay. She's in the hospital. She's had a nervous breakdown." So I remember I wrote her a note and I said, "Hi, Mommy, I hope you're going to be well soon. We're taking care of the baby." My sister was 2 and I
Yes.
was 12. And I told her about my boyfriend, Steve Cram. Yeah, it was not really my boyfriend, somebody I had a crush on. He was moving to Montana. That was important for me to tell her. And, that was really it. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the sofa watching TV, which is something my mother and I always did together. I would sit on the sofa and lean against her shoulder and watch television. Of course, this evening I was by myself on the sofa, and my father came in, and I remember he stood straight. He's 6'4", and he said to me, just like this, "Mommy died." And I just jumped up and began to pound on his chest. And, that was my emotion getting out, pounding on his chest. And he said, "Stop it, stop it." And he gave me a pill. He said, "The doctor said to take this pill." And that knocked me right out for a while, like a day, I guess. And then I woke up and life went on, but not the same for me.
That moment changed everything. The house
Yeah.
that was the hub for the community changed, and then you left it. And your father and mother, who were once a couple, your dad eventually finds a new wife, and then that falls apart. And everything
Mhm.
that was so stable, you
Mhm.
lose from the age of 12 forward. It's hard to succinctly share how the loss of a mother shaped a life, but how did losing your mother change your world going forward?
Well, I heard so much from that, unimaginable. And before my mother died, I wanted to be a famous figure skater or swimmer. But after she died, the hurt was so bad that I just wanted to help other people who were hurting. So I reached out to the boy across the street who was suffering from cancer, and we would play tennis together. I just was more aware of people's sadness, or how could I help?
We could spend time talking about you and school and the first career and family, but I'm going to jump forward a little bit to you having a random encounter because those of us who live in larger cities have these encounters every day as we walk right by it.
Yeah.
We all see the
Mhm.
Millies of the world, and then we
Mhm.
breeze to the other side of the street or we put our head back into our phone.
Right.
But there was a day where I think you were working in New York and you encountered someone. And between that encounter and a sandwich, both of your lives and now many, many, many thousands, millions of lives have been impacted. So to
Mhm.
take us back to
Well,
that moment.
well, for sure, it changed my life. I took a job with the Warner Lambert Company, and I was a consumer promotions manager, but I would get into New York frequently for meetings. And this one day, I was about to pass a woman who I'd seen before. She was elderly in her late 70s. She was bent over. She sat on a crate with her belongings in a paper bag. And she just looked so pathetic that I had to stop before this day. I still don't know what made me stop. I guess it was a cumulative hurt of all the homeless people in New York City that I had passed by. It just didn't seem right. I was living in two worlds. One, the world that you see Karen Olson, and the other world was a more spiritual world where I felt the hurt of people. So I was about to pass this woman who sat on the crate in front of Grand Central Station. And this time I just couldn't. I ran across the street and I got her a sandwich from a deli, ham and cheese sandwich. And I came back and I gave it to her. And she looked up at me and she said, "Thank you. God bless you. I haven't eaten since yesterday."
Mm.
And she reached out and she took my hand. And that taking of my hand made a big impact on me. And we talked for a few minutes. I learned that she had been married. Her husband was a chef and he had died. And she was just left alone. From that experience, I then told my two sons, my sons were then 10 and 12, about Millie.
On the days where we are generous enough to be kind to anyone, we feel like we did our part. On the days when we make a sandwich for the Millies of the world, or we hand someone a dollar or a granola bar or a water or a smile, or we let them in line in front of us on the highway, we feel like we did our part. Check that box and get on with my life. There was something about Millie in that conversation and something about your heart, though, that had you share it not only with your two kids, but then to go back and begin multiplying this effort. So I'm curious, what was it about Millie in the conversation you had with your boys that had you go back?
Well, she was just so terribly sad, of course, and that was something I could relate to. But I had felt the pain of people who were suffering from homelessness in New York City, but I never did anything about it. So it was like a buildup. And when I gave her the sandwich and to see her reaction and how much that meant, I then told my two sons, who were then 10 and 12, about Millie. And my younger son, Doug, said, "Mom, let's go into the city and find more people like Millie." So we made 25 sandwiches and skated around Central Park with a backpack on our back. But we exhausted the supply of sandwiches all too quickly. And so we definitely needed to make more next time. So we made 50 and then we made 75. It ended up that we would do this. Well, my younger son would do it with me for about 2 years, every 2 weeks.
I think I heard that you even invited some friends that you'd met either in the park or somewhere else to your house for Thanksgiving dinner. Like that was part of the early iteration of what you were trying to do. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. And what's true and what's funny about it, at the same time, I've never cooked a Thanksgiving dinner ever in my whole life. And I'm not a very good cook. But as Thanksgiving was rolling around, I thought, why not? I don't know how these thoughts come to me, but then I act on them. So 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I distributed an all invitation and bus tickets to people in Port Authority who I knew. And they got on the bus that Thursday and came to my house, suburban community.
At our family, we have a difficult time bringing my wife's family and my family together without having a fight. I say that a little tongue in cheek, but people who know each other and love each other and are safe among each other, there's risk of conflict. You're opening your home with your precious children to strangers.
Well, they weren't really strangers. We knew them over time by
Okay.
going into Port Authority. It was John and Abe and Arthur and Lucille and so on. So They were already our friends,
So these are your
not
friends.
strangers.
How many friends did you have for dinner?
8.
What happens after Thanksgiving with your 8 friends? Where does this journey take you next?
Oh, we would just continue to go back into New York every 2 weeks, and they would say, "Oh, it was such a nice dinner. It was so good to see your home, Karen." And I think they felt closer to me. I know I felt closer to them.
As you
Yeah.
begin to get to know these homeless people as Millie and actually
Yeah.
having a story behind them and a former husband who was a chef and everything
Mhm.
else that you're learning, what misconceptions were being sort of eradicated as you began to know them as individuals?
And they were people who had some problems. Some did have a drinking problem, but mostly they were just caring people who had fallen on hard times. Like John, he was in the army and he ended up in a veterans home thanks to one of our volunteers. But these were just people we cared about, and they cared about us. We had another gathering at my home in the summer. Abe was looking at the back of my house. We had a cookout, and he said, "Those gutters look like they're about to fall off, Karen. You need to get those fixed. Maybe next time I can do that."
Well,
So,
maybe broken like the rest of us, but they were just people trying to do their best lives.
right, and more exposed because they weren't housed, so they were seen as being homeless and trying to lead their best life. So these were just people that I began to care about, and they cared about me. So that was a misconception that didn't have any life to it.
Karen, you're bringing them sandwiches, which is meaningful, but it's so temporary. As you
Mhm.
recognize, the ham sandwich on Sundays every other week isn't enough to
Mhm.
really get these people out of this position in life.
No, of
What do you
course
begin
not.
what do you begin structuring around you to figure out, well,
Mhm.
so then what is?
Well, after I did that for a while, I heard about homeless families being the fastest growing segment of the homeless population. So I began to volunteer in New Jersey. I volunteered in Elizabeth at a soup kitchen, and there I met people who were homeless and about to be homeless. And I met families, and I saw little kids who were homeless but staying at a shelter, Salvation Army shelter. And I thought, wow, does the religious community know that it's not just a stereotypical homeless person that you walk over in New York City,
Yes.
but there are children who are homeless with their parents. And so I planned a conference on family homelessness, and I invited the religious community. I expected about 100, and 200 people came to that all-day conference. And so right away, I knew that people cared and they wanted to make a difference.
Tell me about Family Promise. You're telling us the origin story from sandwiches to dinners to cookouts in the backyard to a conference with 100 people. Actually, make that 200 people as it expanded and doubled. Where does it go from there?
I said at the end of the conference, let this not be just an informative conference, but a springboard from which we can take action. So I
Yes.
planned another meeting 2 or 3 weeks away on a Tuesday at Christ Church in Summit, New Jersey. And to my surprise, about 30 people came. It was just supposed to be a small meeting to see what we could do. We looked for a building. Nobody wanted a shelter in their backyard.
Yes.
And so it was very hard to find a building and provide shelter. But the congregations were eager to help out. They said, why not? If we all work together, maybe we can do together what we none of us can do alone. So
Mm.
12 religious congregations, synagogue, churches came together and agreed to provide shelter in their buildings for a week at a time on rotation with the others. So what I created was a shelter, but more than that, I created community. I like to think that God wanted me to create community rather than find a building. But because we couldn't find a building, we did this rotational model, which made all the difference because volunteers got involved. Some even became godparents of people in our program. They helped write resumes, donated cars, repaired cars. It was a whole out well and genuine compassion.
You're talking now about kids and families, and I think many of our listeners may not recognize what a profound challenge and how massive the challenge is in our country and beyond. How common is it for a family to be homeless?
It's quite common. In fact, 1 out of every 30 homeless persons is a child. And the issue is not homelessness, that's the outcome. But the core issue is poverty. And if they're low income, they can't afford to put food on the table, pay their electric bill, and so on. So they end up homeless, They need a living wage that supports them, which they don't have.
I don't think I asked you the year, Karen, but what year did this all begin?
1986, I built the first program thinking it was just going to fill in the gap until we could find a building. I thought a building would be better, but actually, this idea of community is what took off. And the reason for that is in every community, there's people who are experiencing homelessness, and there are people who care and want to make a difference. And so it began to spread. And then I formed a national organization in 1988 because I saw how much interest there was. So it started that way, and then I was able to form the national organization and hire a staff, and
Yes.
we were able to respond to needs all across the country. It was a replicable program, and so that's what made it expand. And that was a beautiful thing. When I would go to one of our national conferences to see people there, both former guests and volunteers would be so grateful for the opportunity to be served by the program, but
Wow.
also to be a volunteer.
I'd like to hear why. So let's focus first on the families who were homeless that you supported. When they came up to you and they said to you, "We're just so grateful for what you did." What are they saying to you? Like, what's beneath those words? I think it's obvious, but I'd like to hear, what are they really saying? You gave us this.
Thank you, Karen. You kept our family together when we didn't know where we were going to go. You helped us so much. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to go on. Something like that. That's what they would say.
And then behind them is the volunteer, someone
Yeah,
who
the
gave their
volunteer.
time, someone who did it for free and without any prestige. And then they come up to you and
Yeah,
they say, "Karen, thank you for," what are they saying?
they're saying thank you for the opportunity to make a difference. I always wanted to do something directly to help people, and now I found a way. In fact, our whole family is involved. My children are involved.
It seems if we throw people in a directional path of where they can make a difference, they line up. And I'm
Right.
curious, what have you learned as you've now done this? You've helped guide a couple 100,000 folks forward to say yes to serve and make a difference. So, what have you learned about the heart of a servant?
That people are basically compassionate. And if they're given the opportunity, they'll make a difference. Not everybody, but here these were members of religious congregations who became host congregations. And when they knew it was something right in their own church or synagogue, they wanted to make a difference. And so there was an outpouring of compassion and volunteers. When we first started the program, we got more volunteers than we needed. So that's what gave me so much hope, is to see how much people cared and wanted to make a difference. That's what encouraged me.
In learning a little bit about your work in the early days, you would feed them, and 3 hours later, they'd be hungry again. What blew me away about your work today is you're not just feeding them, you're teaching them how to sort of feed themselves. And you're not just
Right,
putting a temporary
exactly.
tent over their head. You're teaching them to build a life that has a structure below it and a strong foundation in a house, ultimately to live in. So, would you share with
Right.
our audience a little bit about the stats around what happens as individuals work with your organization?
80% find housing through the Family Promise Program, but then a bunch more people are helped to find residents with family members who they may lost touch with.
And Karen, I'm
You
just
know,
going to echo it on the chance that someone, was switching lanes on the highway and missed what you said. 80% of the families
Mhm.
that you serve find long-term homes, find
Yeah,
long-term residence somewhere. That's
long-term housing.
that's an
Yeah,
unbelievable statistic.
yeah.
If you made me guess before I learned about your journey, I would have assumed 5 to 10% would ultimately elevate and find long-term housing. So what is it about the way you structured this that allow people to not just find temporary homes, but to find long-term housing?
Well, it's because we have, staff who really work hard, but we also have volunteers who signed up to help provide shelter, but they end up providing meals even for the families after they leave. Some volunteers have employed guests in their own companies. They've repaired cars, donated cars. They've
Mm.
done so much. And so that attributes to our success rate. If we didn't have the volunteers, I don't think our success rate would be that high. And we're offering them not just the shelter and the services, but our secret sauce is we care
Mm.
and we want to help.
Did losing your mother somehow prepare you to recognize the pain in others? You were 12 when it happened,
Yeah,
agonizingly shifted
yes.
permanently. But I'm curious, how did that open up your heart in ways
Well,
that you did not see back then?
it made all the difference. I became sensitive to other people's needs and I didn't know when to stop. So I ended up focusing on homeless families, which led to the creation of Family Promise. Yeah, I never talk about that. I talk about it more because I've written a book now, but I never would share that with anyone. I would just try to help and do.
There's so many folks listening to our conversation who have so much wealth, have such a nice firm roof and firm foundation, and we have everything. And yet we long for more. Why do you think there's an ache on the hearts of those who have achieved success but not found fulfillment?
Material goods and success and climbing the corporate ladder don't make you necessarily happy. That money you spend on jewelry or designer handbag at the first take of the items, it may gives you a little rush and makes you happy for a short time, but it can't give you long-term happiness.
Mm.
And if people knew that if they just reached out beyond themselves, happiness might catch up with them. It's when you go beyond yourself and help others that you feel fulfilled. At least I did, and I know that's true of many other people too. You've got to go outside yourself and help. That makes all the difference.
Karen, back in 1987, I was burned, and that accident shaped my life
Yeah,
permanently. And yet, looking back on it, it shaped it for good. In 2019, you went through your own tragedy. Would you share with
yeah.
our listeners and viewers what you endured and what has grown out of that?
I retired in 2016 and thought I would enjoy relaxation and doing different things. I wanted to finish writing my book and travel with my family. I had a small condo in Miami Beach. Look forward to spending some time there.
Mm.
But in 2019, 19 on February 2nd. I remember how I was sitting by the edge of the pool, waiting for my cryotherapy appointment. And for those who may not know what cryotherapy is, it's extremely cold therapy that's supposed to lift you up, lose weight, It was a very trendy thing, and I had done it about 30 times between Miami Beach and Summit, New Jersey. And this time, when I went to the desk, they said, you'll have a new attendant. And she's only had 4 weeks of experience, but she's been very well trained. So I said, well, okay. And when the attendant took me to the cryotherapy chamber and she opened the door, I went in as usual. But then I got very, very cold. I lost consciousness. And I said, I'm very cold, I'm cold, I'm cold. So she went to open the door, but she opened the door not knowing that I just couldn't walk out. I was frozen and I felt like a popsicle and hit my head on a raised ledge.
Mm.
And I began bleeding on the head. People were rushing around me, screaming and yelling. But then the rescue squad came and, got me out. I did have the presence of mind for me to call my 2 sons, and they came, and I couldn't feel anything from my neck down. That's what scared me. I just couldn't feel anything from the neck down. So I was taken to the hospital, and they operated on me, and it turned out that I had an incomplete injury. An incomplete is actually good because that means they can help. If you have a complete injury, that means that spinal cord was cut as opposed to being damaged. I was in the hospital for a month in Miami Beach.
What have you lost the ability to do? What can you no longer move now?
I had no feeling from the neck down for a while, but then I slowly gained recovery. So today I can move everything except my right arm, but my fingers are curled.
Yes.
And that makes it a little difficult, but I'm able to paint. I was a painter before, and I'm a painter now. A little more impressionistic than I usually painted, but I still
I've heard that
enjoy painting.
if we become friends and you invite me to Thanksgiving, that everywhere around your house I'll find paintings that you painted. Is that true?
Yes, I love painting.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, I'll tell you what the bigger picture behind me means. I can't really see because my head is in the water.
We
But
see
I
clearly.
painted that during my son's nap time when they were 2 and 4. And what it means to me, there's a pathway from the bottom all the way up. Yeah. See, there's a slight pathway. And I just painted that from my mind. And what it meant to me is I was very depressed at the time, postpartum depression, or I don't know what, very, very depressed. In fact, I was hospitalized on and off for a while.
Wow.
But when my sons were sleeping, I would paint this, and it meant hope for me because there was a pathway out of it. I wasn't feeling light and bright like that painting. I was feeling very depressed, not knowing what would happen.
Mm.
And that painting that I painted showed things I'll overcome a lot. There's a pathway out of this. That's what painting meant to me.
Sounds like a meaningful thing to hold on to when you have a 2 and 4-year-old, and also a meaningful thing you should hold on to when you've lost the ability temporarily to walk. And also something to hold on to throughout the course of our lives as we lose things we once took for granted.
Yeah, that's true. But now I paint with my left hand. Jen, would you show John the painting in the foyer there? So I love to do that. And I go to art class and I'm able to paint. This picture isn't finished yet, but
I'm going to put it in front of Karen for a minute.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, it's almost like an oil painting. It has texture to it.
It is an oil painting.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, all my paintings behind me and everything are in oil.
What
So
does that,
it's
the one you just held up, what does that one mean to you?
it means beauty and growth and positivity. It's a happy painting. All my paintings are happy paintings, and they're of nature, something
It,
people can relate to.
what keeps you excitedly moving forward today? You've lived a lifetime of experiences, some incredible
Mm.
blessings, and also mighty hardships. What keeps you moving forward joyfully today?
I'm just a happy person, and I believe that life is a journey, and I can help people along the way, and I do. So I am quite happy. I'm very happy, and I feel like with the AIDS I have and Jen, I have an extended family. And
Mm.
so I'm not depressed at all. I had to sell my house and I live in an apartment, but the apartment is right next to a beautiful pond with a walkway all around it, 1.5 miles. I just enjoy the park, seeing people I know. So I look at life differently. I'm very happy.
There's a quote I've heard you use a couple times. So I'm going to quote it back to you, and then you tell me whose life changed. Ready? So here it is. A sandwich changed a life, but not the life she expected.
Right, exactly.
Whose life was changed through that sandwich then?
My life was changed. It was a gift and a blessing in many ways. I believe that all I've gone through and the suffering with my mother's death has led to many blessings, actually. The underside of that is it made me want to reach out to others, and that has made all the difference.
Karen Olson, we have 7 questions that we guide all of our friends through as we wrap up our podcast. And so the very
Okay.
first question to my friend is, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
I like the Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Wow. What's one positive characteristic or one beautiful trait that you possessed as a little girl growing up that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
Being playful and carefree. I'd like to have more of that in my life,
Hmm,
but I pretty almost have it.
that's right. If your home caught fire and all
Yeah.
living things are out, but you have an opportunity of racing back in and grabbing one item, what one physical thing would you come racing back outside with?
A picture of my grandmother and myself. That was my mother's mother, was an important influence in my life after my mother died.
If you could sit on a bench with anyone living or deceased and have a long conversation, who would you like to have seated next to you?
Mm, Oprah Winfrey. Yeah.
What's the best advice Oprah, your grandmother, or anyone else ever gave you?
This too shall pass.
Wow.
Yeah, this too shall pass.
So I interviewed my mother, and I think that was her takeaway as well. And my mom, we've had 2 house fires, and she hung that little
Wow.
poster in our kitchen before the first fire, after the first fire, before the second fire, and after the second fire. This idea
Oh
that when you're on
gosh.
top of the world, it should fade, and when you're underneath it, this also will fade. So hang on.
Yeah. I can't believe that you yourself were on fire at a young age and then you had 2 health fires.
Yeah.
What does
Well,
that mean?
you know what I think it means looking back on it that God works through everything, even our own
Yeah.
brokenness and mistakes and addictions and
Mm,
everything else, that if you can hang on, it will be redeemed.
yeah, well said, yes.
What would you tell yourself at age 20? So if you could go back in time just a couple years and whisper some wisdom to your 20-year-old self, what would you say to her?
I would say things are tough now, but just hang on. Things will change for you and you'll have many gifts to give people.
Karen Olson, the ultimate gift giver. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
She turned pain into blessings and helped many.
My friend Karen Olson gave one lady a sandwich And in that process, fed another and another and housed another and another. And a million lives later, she keeps going. She took pain, turned it into a blessing, and helped many. And I'm grateful to have been part of her family that she's impacted. So, Karen, I want to thank you for being part of our Live Inspired community.
Thank you, John. I'm delighted to be a part of it. And you're an inspiration to so many.
My
So
friends, you're
many
listening to
ways.
the voice and the testimony of a true inspiration. Her name is Karen Olson. My name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift it is. Live with your soul on fire.
Well, friends, what a beautiful reminder from Karen today that we don't have to solve every problem in the world to make a difference. Sometimes change in a life simply begins with seeing the person in front of us, taking one small step, and trusting that compassion has a way of creating ripple effects far beyond what we can see or even imagine. If you enjoyed today's episode, you're going to love the conversation I had a couple of years ago with my buddy Damon West. Damon is a big-time author and speaker and a great guy, friend of mine. He shares how one decision changed the trajectory of his own life, taking him from a 65-year prison sentence to ultimately becoming a nationally recognized speaker, a best-selling author, and a servant leader. You'll leave reminded that no matter our past or our circumstances, one choice can change everything. Listen to Damon West's conversation with John O'Leary on Live Inspired Podcast 738. That's 738. Or come on over, join me online right now, johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. In the show notes of today's episode, I'll have a link for you. Well, family, I want to thank you for tuning in to this episode, and I want to remind you that your life can positively change the world. So for this time and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire.
Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.